So the first thing for me was I saw this commercial for what ended up being Kiss Alive 2, and I saw Peter Criss behind the drums, had drums coming from here all the way around, and he's on this riser, and it's just going up in the air, and there's lights everywhere, and I said, that's the job that I want. And you know, when I speak to guys that are older than me, you know, of course it's always Ringo, which I love Ringo. But for me, honestly, and Ringo was the guy that got them into drumming. And for me, I like to joke that Peter Criss was my Ringo in, you know, getting me into to drumming. So he was the kind of the first reason why I said, that's the job I want. And so I started playing drums when I was about 11 years old, and I was taking lessons. And then in high school, I was playing in the Greater Boston Youth Symphony, and I took some lessons with a local legend, a lot of people know in the jazz world, named Alan Dawson. And growing up in Massachusetts was a really great place, fruitful musically. And my high school band director went to North Texas in the 60s, and he had turned me on to North Texas. And so I ended up going to his alma mater after high school. Yeah, so I moved to Nashville in 1997. You know, I'd gone to North Texas, got my degree in music. I did a little bit of traveling around, landed in Nashville in 1997, and was playing in clubs locally. And then 1998, I landed a gig with a real country artist named Mark Chestnut. Played with him for 2 years. At that time, I was still playing in the clubs a lot, and I'd met Jay DeMarcus, who's, you know, one of my bosses with Rascal Flatts, and we were playing some club gigs together. And then 1999, I'm playing with Mark. He was MD and the keyboard player for Shelley Wright, and Shelley Wright went and opened up for us on the tour, the '99 Mark Chestnut tour. So at that point, now Jay had hired Joe Don to play guitar with Shelley Wright. I was playing with the headliner. We were hanging out together every weekend. Then we were playing gigs together during the week. And about that time, I started to realize that, you know, Jay certainly had ambitions to try to get a record deal in country music, and had told me about his cousin Gary, and then we started playing gigs with Gary. And again, these are $40 gigs in, you know, local bars. And at about that time, he started saying, you know, we're gonna try to get a record deal. And, you know, if we get a record deal, we'd love for you to come out and play with us. And I'm thinking, well, you know, yeah, if you get a record deal, I mean, that sounds fantastic. You know, certainly they're talented enough, but it's a tough business, you know. And so sure enough, they got a record deal, and they asked me if I would come out and play with them. They said, listen, we know you're playing with Mark, and Mark's had, you know, a dozen #1 hits, and we haven't really done anything yet, but if you want to take a chance with us, we would love to have you out there. And for me, being the age I was at that time, I had gotten with Mark kind of after his most glorious days. And I said, well, what an opportunity it would be to kind of grow with these guys. And what if this really turned into something? This just seems like too great of an opportunity. I listened to their music. I was blown away by the direction that they were headed. And so I said, yeah, man, count me in. So I quit playing with Mark, and I started playing with Rascal Flatts in like March of 2000. And we've done it for 20 years. It's been pretty cool.
Wow.
I keep pretty busy. I've always been extremely grateful to be with Rascal Flatts, but also acknowledging that there could come a time where that is not there. And as a matter of fact, as we're taping this thing right now, I mean, Rascal Flatts, along with every other major act in the world, certainly in the United States and North America, is not touring. So that being said, I've always been preparing for, the idea that I can't have all my eggs in one basket musically. So I've always really enjoyed teaching. I've really enjoyed recording and writing, and so I keep really busy. Probably since about 2007, I've had a program where I teach local kids from the 6th grade to 12th grade in group lessons. So I teach them on a weekly basis. I teach private lessons in person and over the internet. Over the last couple of years, I've really gotten into recording from home and recording for clients in Nashville and all around the world. And that's been really gratifying. I really enjoy that as well. And then I do in-person camps, where I have people come here and study with me for the weekend. And all of this kind of looks to, diversify my interests in music, so that, I like to think about my portfolio of work like it's a round table with 10 legs, which I don't know where you put your feet if you did that. But if you had one with 3 legs and you knocked one out, doesn't matter which one, the table's gonna fall. But I mean, shoot, I could knock out 4 legs on a 10-leg table, and as long as it's the right ones, I'd probably be okay. So that's the way I've thought about it. I kind of try to keep things diversified, and hopefully at some point when Rascal Flatts can go back out, I'll be better for it. Well, teaching has been something that I've always been involved with. I majored in music education at University of North Texas, got my degree in music education. And when I had my house in East Nashville, which was a really cute little house with a great basement that I loved, just didn't really have great access to the basement. And so I never really felt comfortable, having students over. And so when my wife and I decided, we really need to get a new house, just for the purposes that we like to start a family, and we wanted to be in an area that was a little bit more suburban, and house was a little bit bigger. So the house was basically built around the idea that I was going to build a studio in my basement. So we built the house in 2007, and the Drum Dojo studio was born. And at first it was just a teaching studio, then it's become a recording studio, and now it's kind of becoming almost like a TV studio. It's pretty great. It's been an incredible multi-use facility for me, and I have a lot of fun down here. There's a lot of ways. A lot of people contact me, through Facebook Messenger or Instagram, which are really great. And they can also go to my website, jimrileymusic.com, and hit me up there. But I'm pretty easy to find. It's really the same thing, I've done 20 of those Drum Dojo weekends, and it's all been organic. I've never bought any advertising. I've never, it's all really just been on Facebook and Instagram, basically saying, hey, I'm doing this weekend. Who's interested in coming, spending some time, just getting better at their craft, becoming a better musician behind the drum set. And fortunately, to this point, there hasn't been any shortage of people that have wanted to do it. I've had about 100 people come study here for that, and we have a great time. It is more challenging, but fortunately, that was an adjustment that I made a couple of years ago. So I was ready for that challenge when this timing hit. It was something that inevitably, with kind of the reach with some of the things that I've done with my books, and through exposure with websites like Drumeo and different things like that, where people are starting to know me, nationally and internationally. that it became necessary to be able to have the ability to teach online. So it's something I was doing some, and then of course when the pandemic has come, a lot of my in-person students had, gone to internet, and so that was a technology I was already ready for, and it's been very enjoyable. There are some limitations to it, but if you know what they are and you know how to work around them, it can be a really great way to teach. And one of the greatest things about it is I get to see these drummers in their natural environment playing their own drum set, so I can give them feedback about their kit as well, and ends up being a pretty good situation. Well, again, my passion for teaching has had me teaching beginners. It's had me teaching professionals. It's had me teaching hobbyists. The one group that I wasn't teaching a lot was college students, because they've got their own professors. And frankly, when I've got my students that have studied with me from 6th grade to the 12th grade, I'm more than happy for them to get exposed to some other teacher to show them a different, way of doing things. Having said that, being at Belmont University here in Nashville, Tennessee, is a great opportunity because it gives me a chance to be with some young people that are really at a pivotal point in their career. And, one thing that I've always been a bit critical about at the university level, and I will definitely exclude Belmont from this criticism because they've been so forward thinking with their commercial music program. But most places, I feel like they focus on the wrong things. They're focusing on an antiquated curriculum that is as relevant to 1950 as it is for anything else. I talked to a music historian, and I said, listen, if I told you that we were studying jazz, we had a focus on marching band and marimba, what year are we talking about? And she was like, well, that really most represents like 1927, like where you had, VFW marching bands in every community, and the marimba was very popular, so the curriculums haven't really adjusted to the times. Now, I would definitely exclude Belmont from those criticisms because, like I said, they started one of the first what they call commercial music program, and they've been very forward thinking about their curriculum, and they've hired me because they want me to teach what I feel is important. Now, along the way, they certainly have, we want you to make sure that they're proficient at these things, but they want me to do it my way, so I'm going to be using my books, and it's a situation I'm very much looking forward to. I start with them next week. It's really different, actually. Survival Guide is a styles book, so I wanted to walk people through the styles that were required of me to be a professional musician in our time. Whether that's playing rock, jazz, blues, but also things like country, metal, reggae, you name it. I mean, I tried to be as representative of styles. I tried to be as representative of styles as I could be, and that book's been very successful. And it's been 5 years since I put out Survival Guide, and so I started working on improvisational tools, and it is the complete flip side. And so what I did with the covers, and this one here is, I mean, literally, my hands are burning. This is hot off the presses. This was printed 2 days ago, actually in the town that I live in. Now, so with Survival Guide, that's the drum set on the cover. So 5 years later, what I did was I set up the same drum set, and it's the opposite side of the same drum set. So when I think about these books, they're really two sides of the same coin. So if Survival Guide is about learning styles and playing grooves, Improvisational Tools is just that. It's about learning language around the drum set to make you more proficient, so you can create more unique fills. You can learn to express yourself around the drum set as a soloist, and a lot of people don't know where to begin with that. And so that's language that I've been writing on pieces of paper for 25 years. And now I don't have to write the language down. I can just say turn to page 40 and there it is. And so that's been pretty cool. This version of the book, as if you can see there, I wrote, this is the early edition. So this is an edition that I'm actually only using with my current students to kind of beta test the book. And I wanted to start at Belmont University having that book in my curriculum. And my next step for the book is I'm going to be shooting video, and I'm going to have certainly not as many tracks as I did with Survival Guide, because there's 124 play-along tracks, which is an insane amount. But with improvisational tools, it's going to be some simple kind of groove tracks that inspire people to play language around the drum set. And so that's my next step with the book, and then I'll be officially releasing the book to the public probably in November. Yeah, so this is an interesting evolution that happened. When you're a player in the 90s, typically you'd go to a gig and you'd have a regular 4-wedge and then you'd have a sub. And man, there's nothing like having a sub and feeling that low end. It was fantastic feeling. But I mean, what it did to our ears back then, it's unbelievable. There's a reason why I'm hearing a ringing in this room right now that doesn't exist. I have tinnitus, and most musicians that were exposed to that kind of decibel level, did some really detrimental things to their ears. So one of the natural, really great evolutions of sound reinforcement were the in-ear monitors. So when I moved to Nashville in 1997, I'd never been exposed to them. I started playing with Mark Chestnut in 1998, and I was on my first gig with Mark. My first gig with Mark was actually, it's documented, you can find it on the internet. I was playing on the first season of the show The View up in New York City. And that was my first gig with Mark, was playing on that live TV show. And the monitor engineer, a guy named Mark Gould, he's been for the last probably 20 years, he's been Brad Paisley's monitor engineer. So Mark Gould reaches around my head, puts a little set of in-ear monitors in my ears, and I went, wow, and then off to the races. So this is great, and there's a lot of fantastic positives to playing with in-ear monitors. One of the things I really loved, if you're using a click track, it was great to be able to have your monitor mix and your click track kind of all like right there together. You could play the music at a lower volume, which is really great. It naturally isolated you from the loud drums, again, which was all a real positive. The one negative in all of this was that we're using speakers that are this big. And so there was no low end there. And that was the big trade-off. And you could use a big giant sub, but then it just didn't make a lot of sense. So a friend of mine that I went to college with had a really nice stint, as a rock star with Sister Hazel. It's Mark Trojanowski. And Mark was in town with Sister Hazel, and he called me and said, hey, you want to come out to our show? I said, yeah, sure. So I went to his local show in Nashville, and he showed me his kit, and then he showed me the Clark synthesis thumpers. And I went, whoa, that's a great idea. And what I liked about them is it's not that, thumpers didn't exist, but it was the way that the Clark Synthesis tactile sound units worked. For me, these are real speakers, and they're producing a real sonic tone as opposed to just smacking you. And kind of, when I would sit on those things, they were just shocking and abrupt, and I was like, that's not something I want to have any part of. But the Clark units just had a musicality. So I immediately reached out to you and made contact with you and was like, yeah, this is what I mean. This was, correct me if I'm wrong, that was early 2000s that I started, and I only know that because the throne that I was using was like a throne I've had forever, and my drum tech at the time was not really a drum tech. He was actually this was so early in the days of Rascal Flatts that the merch guy was setting up my drums, and I asked him to help to put these on there, and he, instead of drilling something in this way, he ripped the top completely off of the throne and then put all the hardware on there, and then he duct taped the whole thing back together. And I think it's still somewhere around here. I have this duct taped thing, and the duct tape, by the way, has lasted for almost 20 years. It's an unbelievable shape. But since then, we've figured out much better ways to mount the Clark Synthesis tactile units onto a throne, and I'll show you what I did with mine just earlier today. I just installed some new units, and they're very easy to install, and they come with all of the mounting hardware that you would ever want for any situation. So I started using them in the early 2000s, and I haven't looked back. They've been on every touring kit that I've ever had, and they're just part of creating a sonic experience where you're not missing the big sound reinforcement, and yet you can do it at a level where you can use them even in a recording studio, because the sound that they make that we're looking for, we're reinforcing the low end, is not something that's really going to get picked up by the microphones. So it's a fantastic invention, and I'd have a hard time living without it. Well, it gives you a fuller sonic picture. Again, if we were in a room with big giant speakers, you would feel the drums. But even when you're in a live situation, modern speakers have such great rejection to the rear. So when I'm projecting the music forward to the audience, and we've got these big 18-inch subs, and we're projecting, this low end to the audience, they have tremendous rejection to the rear. So when you're on stage, and you've been on our stage, it's extremely quiet, eerily quiet. If you're not listening to any music, you hear the live drums, maybe you hear like a live guitar backstage, but there's very little sonic like low end on stage. So it really and for me, I've become a headphone person because the sonic thing really mattered to me. So I've gone beyond the inner things. I've gone to the headphones. It gives me more low end in the headphones, but the Clark Synthesis, tactile units give me it completes the sonic picture, where when I'm playing, I have the perception, I hear the high end, I feel the low end, and the more comfortable I am with what I'm hearing, the better I'm going to play. I have two mounted on my throne, and it's because I'm spoiled. Because I've got a great relationship with you, and I have two. Frankly, anyone could mount one on there and have a great sonic experience. Two lets you just have a little bit less load on each one, so it's a great experience. But frankly, someone could mount one on there and do really great, because they're really great units. But I'm spoiled, and I've got two on there, and it works fantastic. Yes, absolutely. I was just playing with them earlier today, and it's amazing. The feeling I get is very similar to that I have on stage, and it kind of brings me to that place, which is really great. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd be super bummed out. I mean, um, it's it's definitely become like, on the road, it's been an everyday part of our experience there. Um, I love it. Like I said, for me, they complete the sonic picture, and if I didn't have them, it'd be devastating, because it's just such a part of what I do, certainly live and now in my studio. It would be hard to live without them. But when we've had things go wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and if there's ever been a moment where I've had to go without them, I'm super bummed out. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so what we would start to do is, we would have, and again, this is not stuff you want to go, we would have one that my tech was sitting on that wasn't hooked up, and then one that I would, and we got to the point where if we had an issue, which was rare, but if we had an issue, that we could switch it out in between songs and just not skip a beat. And the way that he had them set up, yeah, it was really great that we could switch them out. But yeah, I would yeah, it has become a really big part of my experience out on the road. I've always been a person I've wanted to have, as much one-on-one experience with people. But there's limitations of time, there's limitations of space, and for some people there's limitations of money. And I was looking for different ways to be able to reach people. And the conclusion I came to was deciding to open up the Jim Riley's Drum Dojo Academy. So that's something that's in the process of being launched now, and it's a subscription-based service where I can walk people through the process, from the very beginning of their drumming all the way through advanced concepts, and it's going to be a very organized library of really like my teachings, the things that I have to say, that with my perspective, it's all about becoming a more marketable drummer, a better musician behind the drum set. And so it's, when you're working with me, it's never an intimidating factor. It's never over the top concepts. It's taking the simplest concepts and getting really great at that. And the Drum Dojo Academy is an opportunity for me to reach people all around the world, and for a lot of time as well. I mean, it's stuff that's going to be able to live on, which I'm pretty excited about.
Wow, that's really cool. That's really cool.
Which I literally had really not thought about it, but when you think about like the books, the one thing that I love about these books, and I was very aware of when I was writing them and putting them out, is that these books are for all time. Mm-hmm. So the two most popular drum books in the world are Stick Control and Syncopation. Stick Control, is, at least 80 years old, and Syncopation is, at least 60, 70 years old. And so these books, when you look at the covers, they have a very timeless feel to them. So when I was doing my books, I tried to make books that looked like they had always been next to those books. So I tried to choose a very vintage appeal to these. Like the border that's on this book is actually a similar border to the one that's on Stick Control. You know, I wanted to make it kind of look like, you know, you took this book and it's got a really aged look, like you kind of dusted it off, like, oh, it's always been next to Stick Control. How did I miss this book? You know, and that way it didn't have this look where, like, you know, it has a dated picture of me where, you know, we look 10 years later and you go, oh gosh, that hair, like the clothes, what's he doing, you know? And even, you know, like with the titles, when I talk about Survival Guide for the Modern Drummer, honestly, for me, it's a little bit of an inside joke because the most popular books, like it's called Syncopation for the Modern Drummer. That book's 60 years old. So it's kind of it's kind of an inside joke that, you know, one day people will be using these books and these books will be quite old. And the concept that these are things that will live beyond myself is something that is pretty interesting for me. And certainly the material that I'm going to be working on with the Drum Dojo Academy is the same way, is in that's an archive of my teaching that will live far beyond my own existence. So it's pretty cool.